Don't tell him about the honey, Mummy.
Welcome to Making a Mead, part 6. And today I'm going to talk about the main ingredient, honey. As we know, honey comes from bees and it's collected by the bees as nectar. Quite a lot of energy spent getting a little drop of honey. Nectar is basically sucrose, table sugar, basically. And the bees use enzymes to change that into dextrose, which is glucose, and levitose, which you might know as fructose. The fructose is man-made and levitose is nature's way. And anyone who knows organic chemistry knows there's a right and left-handed version of most chemicals. And most synthetics are the opposite. So I think levitose is left-handed and fructose is right-handed. But fructose is what you would know it as. And basically, if anyone says fructose, if it's natural fructose, it's what they call levulose. The other main thing about the honey is the bees will use the heat and their flapping of their wings and the air circulation to dry out the honey. Most honey is actually below 18%, and in some dry areas and dry seasons, especially in the UK, if you have a really hot summer, your honey will be down to about 15% moisture content. So your honey on a hot season, summer, will actually be more fermentable. And this is why blended honeys make good meads, but single flower or single hive honey can make a beautiful mead. You can get the flower, you get the concentration of that flower. So if you've had a really good summer, and you know your local beekeeper, you might pay a little bit more, but you will make a great mead. I've got some notes here because this is quite a complex video. I'm going to try not to bore you with lots of facts and all that. The average honey content, and this is average, this is not right across the board, because it depends where you get your honey from, what time of year, what season, but the average. Dextroglucose is 31%, 32% of the content. Fructose, as I said, is levulose or fructose, is 38.2%. Maltose is what you beer makers get out of the grains, is 7.5 to 8%. Table sugar, sucrose, 1 to 2%, or 1.5 is average. Higher sugar is about another 1.5 again. So there's your sugars. Why is honey such a fermentable? And if the moisture is above that 18%, because yeast needs moisture to start to ferment, honey will ferment if it's not stored right, or if you put water into it, it will go because of the wild yeasts. Protein, there isn't a lot of protein in honey. It's you know, 0.2%, 0.02%. It's you know, a quarter of 1%. The minerals is about the same. It's about 1/5 of 1%. So, not, you know, apart from the 15 to 20% of moisture, the rest is all sugars, and this is why it's such a great fermentable. Now, honey also comes in different colours and shades, and that's because the time of year it's collected at, the amount it's collected at. If you leave our honey whole year, you'll get a darker honey. The type of nectar the bees are collecting. The best honey you can get is what they call the after winter honey. So it's basically the first flow. And this is called water white honey, and it's very, very clear, and it's very good for meads. Beekeepers don't, in the UK, I don't really collect it so much because we don't have the weather, but I know from acting in the States and they do in the Eastern Europe, where in the steppes they do have, I mean, I've seen pictures of like 500 hives and it's just wild grassland. They collect that honey because it's like the best honey for meads. It produces a really clear mead, or a pale very pale to water mead, but the flavour in it's really good. So that's what they call white water. That's the there's a scale on like an EBC scale, which is like you do for your grains. Here's the list I got: is white water is less than 8mm in the PF scale. It's called P Fund scale. Extra white up to 17. Then you get white honey, not crystallised honey. It's called white honey because the colour is 18 to 34. Extra light amber up to 50. Light amber 85. Your normal honeys that you get are light amber or amber. Acacia honey is white, so extra light amber. So if you see acacia honey, I think they do it in Asda's and Tesco's, you'll see the colour is very pale. But that's not white, that's light amber. Amber, your normal one, up to 114, and your extra dark is above that, and that's like Greek honey. Now, the moisture content is quite important with honey, because as a mead maker you want to know that your moisture is below. They shouldn't sell it, but in this country, in the UK, they will not sell honey. It's not allowed to be sold if it's less than 18.3. Sorry, more than 18.3% moisture in the honey. Now the bees will reduce that moisture and then they will cap it with a wax capping to store it. And that's when you know honey's right, because it's capped. Hence the word, and that's why I said about cappings. When they cut the comb open, a lot of beekeepers use a knife and just cut the comb and drain the honey. They make beeswax candles now because of the money, but in the old days, you used to ask for the cappings. So if you get friendly with a beekeeper, ask for the cappings, because you can make them in, because they actually flush it in water. So if you say, we'll make it in spring water and I'll take the water away to get the wax out, because the wax floats. So break the wax up, mix it all up in water, the honey's in the solution, and then they take off and and clean the wax up. And that's what they throw some yeast in there, and that's what you've got. You've got mead. So yeah, so I think now someone was on about why does it take so long for honey drinks to mature, and this goes for beer as well. The reason, because if you use a beer yeast, it's maltose, it will break down the sugars, or the yeast will break down the higher sugars and other sugars into glucose and then ferment them. The different type of yeast will work on it differently. Now, wine yeasts create phenols, which are higher forms of alcohol. I mean, all alcohol most yeast produces ethanol, but you do produce phenols and esters. Now, esters can be caused by stress on the yeast, the temperature and that, but they do produce them naturally. Why you're aging your mead is because you want the phenols to not be so harsh. Phenols is what burns your throat, like is in cough mixture. So you want that to round off and smooth over, and you want the esters to turn around and round off and calm down and not be so edgy. So you leave it to age. Strong beers like barley wines or very imperial stouts, you age them because they do improve. All those chemicals then blend together. It's masking, they just blend together. Like the Winter Braggot, if you watch my Home Brew Wednesday, number 3 I think it is, where I actually try my own braggot that I've just bottled. It's blending well, it's not blending completely, but it's there. The jigsaw puzzles are fitting, but after aging they're slotting together and it just rounds it all off and becomes a great drink. So that's why you age mead. Now, if you don't heat your mead, so if you do the cold method like I did in part 2, we just throw the honey in the water, shake it up, throw the yeast in, we add the nutrient, but basically that's what we do. After you've fermented out and it's cleared, you can clear it with a clearing agent, bentonite or isinglass. You can use a clearing agent to help clear it. Bottle it, and within 6 to 9 months, drink it, it should have ran it off. Light meads, quick meads like that, and if the alcohol content's not too high, you can drink it young. If you drunk it after, say, 6-7 months and then waited to drink it another 6 months later, you will notice a hell of a difference. Those meads will reach their peak in probably about 18 months to 2 years. Stay at the peak for a couple of years and then start to depreciate. Again, it depends on the honey, it depends on the yeast you've used. If you heat your muster, you can add a year to 2 years if you've heated the honey up. So if you boil the honey to get this and defoam it, which is what's recommended, or a lot of people do because they say to, then you have to wait 3-4 years for that mead to get to its peak, and the plateau will be 3-4 years and then it can drop off. Some meads, and again, it all depends on the natural honey. If you use the right yeast with the right must and the right alcohol level, it can take 5 to 6 years just to get to that peak, and then it'll stay at that for a good 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 years. Now I've got a barrel in the vineyard which is local to me, which I've put in 50 gallons of mead, and I did a couple of years ago. Fermentation took 6 months, so I literally was racking off 5 55 litre carboids into another lot of 5, literally in one day, doing it all at the same time. Now the whole lot was done, all the same ingredients. I actually mixed it in a 50 gallon cold water bucket with I've got a ball valve on it, and we poured it in. Now that's oak aged, because that's gone into a 50 gallon barrel, and that's going to be sat there for a while and appreciating. Now the alcohol level's a little high, it was about 15% I think it worked out at. Oak aging a mead is brilliant. I mean, I know that people go show meads don't have no flavour, it's just the honey from them and that's it. But oak goes so well with honey. If you throw some oak chips in a braggot or a honey ale, just a few oak chips in 5 gallon batch, and leave that in the secondary for 7 days, the flavour just comes up. Meads are exceptional. A good mead, again, depends on your alcohol strength and your honey. If you do a light mead and you're only running at 9%, throw a few chips in for a couple of weeks. If you're doing a gallon demijohn, a month if you're doing a thing, 5 gallon carboid or a 6 US gallon carboid, throw it in for a month, just a few, take them out just to give it some complexity. If you're doing a stronger one, I like mine semi-medium sweet, what I call semi-sweet sometimes. Or if I'm doing a fruit mellow-mild, then I'll add a few more oak chips and leave them in there, and then taste after about 3 weeks and keep tasting a little bit. When you're doing a 1 gallon batch, you can't keep nicking it all because you run out. But when you do the bigger batches, you can nick a little bit and have a taste, and you know when it's oaked. Once you start tasting it, go back to it every 2 or 3 days because it's quite easy to over oak. But oak aging, well, having that oak, it just gives it a great thing, great lift, it just goes. But that's your basics on honey. If you're using an ale yeast, I'm going to quickly go back to the yeasts on this program. If you're using an ale yeast, you've got to remember that you're actually using a yeast that eats maltose. That's why cider yeast is great, because the amount of, it's 38, it's nearly 40% is fructose. So cider yeast are developed to eat fructose because they eat, and wine yeast as well, because they eat the sugar that come out of fruit. So if you're going to make a mead with ale yeast, you want one that's going to take quite a good neutral flavour, because if you take something like a Belgian yeast, which I know a couple of people have done meads with Belgian yeasts and they're not good. So you really need to have a neutral flavour, otherwise you can overpower the honey.